Welcome to Hard Script.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. It was a Friday night. Some house in the suburbs, dim lights, too much wine, a playlist stuck in the early 2000s. We were at a friend's birthday party. That kind of casual gathering where everyone's a little too comfortable. You know the type, shoes off, red Solo cups, recycled jokes from college days. I wasn't drinking much. I never really do anymore. She was across the room, sitting with her usual crew of loud, always laughing women. The kind that love to talk over each other, but somehow always hear every word. She had a glass of wine in one hand and her phone in the other. Scrolling between sips like attention was a commodity she could only give in pieces. I wasn't even listening at first. Not to her, anyway. I was in a conversation with Daniel about his new job, something in real estate, and I remember nodding out of politeness when I heard her voice cut through the noise. Sometimes I miss my ex. He was more fun. Things didn't feel so routine. She laughed. That soft, performative kind of laugh women use when they want plausible deniability. Someone else laughed too. I couldn't tell who. My hand didn't shake. My jaw didn't clench. I didn't look over right away. I just let the sentence hang there. Like smoke in a room no one wants to acknowledge. A few seconds later, she glanced at me across the room. Maybe to check if I'd heard. Maybe to check if I'd react. I smiled. Cold. Clean. Quiet. And I said, not loud, not dramatic, just enough for her to hear. Good to know. That was it. No confrontation. No public scene. No angry whisper in her ear on the way to the car. But something in me folded. Quietly. Permanently. I didn't even feel pain. That's the strange part. There was no emotional earthquake. No gut punch. What I felt was subtraction. She had said what she said. That wasn't the problem. The problem was why she said it. In that moment, in that room, to be seen, to be heard, to remind me and everyone around that I wasn't enough. So I did what most men don't do. I listened, not to what she said, to what it meant. And I started mentally leaving the room, even as I stood there. That night, we drove home in silence. She hummed to a song on the radio like nothing happened. And I realized. This wasn't a moment. It was a message. She missed her ex? Perfect. Let's see how she feels when the man she's with disappears without taking a single step out the door. I didn't bring it up. Not that night. Not the next day. Not ever. She moved through the weekend like she always did, talking too loud on speakerphone, planning brunch with people I only half recognized from Instagram, throwing her clothes across the back of chairs like we lived in a showroom instead of a home. She danced around the kitchen while making eggs, smiled like she was in a commercial, kissed me on the cheek, distracted. It was nothing new. But now, everything felt different, because I had heard her. And once you hear something like that, you can't unhear it. Not the words, the intention. It wasn't about the ex. It wasn't even about the past. It was about placement, where I stood in her mental catalog of men. The ex was fun. I was something else. A placeholder. A utility. Something safe. Something she didn't have to work for. So I stopped working too. Not in some big, cinematic way. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't storm out. I just started, releasing. Releasing the need to be interesting. Releasing the need to be chosen. Releasing the role of the man who fixes what she quietly breaks. We had been married 8 years. No kids. That was mutual. Or at least it started that way. We built a life on predictability, which I thought was a good thing. Stability, routine, rhythm. But now I saw the cracks. Every plan I made? Boring. Every suggestion I offered? Met with a shrug. Every quiet night together? We never do anything. But when I planned trips, she was tired. When I asked questions, she was scrolling. When I gave her space, she filled it with absence. So I asked myself, what am I doing here? Not out loud. Not yet. Just internally. Quietly. I started tracking my own energy like it was currency. Watching where it went, and how little came back. Every gesture I used to make coffee in the morning, back rub after work, random texts just to say I was thinking of her, I stopped them one by one. And nothing changed. That's when the truth hit me hardest. She didn't notice. Because she wasn't looking. And I realized she hadn't been here for a long time. I had been the only one showing up to this marriage for years. She was still physically present, her clothes in the closet, her name on the lease, but emotionally, she'd been gone. And now? Now it was my turn to leave. Not the house. Not the marriage. But the role I'd been playing. The predictable, ever-available, ever-accommodating man who smiled through every microcut because he thought loyalty meant endurance. That man was gone. And the one who remained? He was just getting started. I didn't spiral. I calculated. That's what most people get wrong about men like me. They think silence means confusion. That if we're not raising our voices or slamming doors, we must not be feeling anything. Wrong. I was feeling everything. I just wasn't offering her a front row seat anymore. The sentence at that party? That wasn't a slip. That was a data point. So I started collecting more. Not out of paranoia, out of precision. I watched what she praised and what she dismissed. She'd light up when talking about wild weekends from her 20s, some road trip with no plan and cheap tequila. But when I booked a weekend getaway, one with actual thought, decent hotels, and time off work, she called it nice, in the same tone people use when someone shows them a boring vacation slideshow. She said she missed spontaneity, but never created any. Said she wanted romance, but met affection with sarcasm. And the more I watched, the more one truth became obvious. She didn't want me to be better. She wanted to feel superior. She liked me stable. She liked me structured. Until she didn't. So I asked myself a different question. Not, how do I fix this? But, why am I still trying to? I started reviewing my role in this relationship like an investor reading a quarterly report. Return on energy? Low. Mutual effort? Sporadic. Emotional respect? Declining. The real gut punch wasn't what she said. It was how long I'd accepted a version of love that required me to shrink. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her. I wasn't going to teach her how to treat me. I wasn't going to beg someone to see what they were already looking away from. I would remove my participation. Not all at once, but carefully, quietly, strategically. First, I stopped initiating conversations unless they were necessary. No more, how was your day? No more filling silence with small talk just to keep the air warm. I moved our joint calendar off my phone. Stopped planning dinners. Stopped tracking the details that made her life easier but invisible. If I was boring, let her live in the version of this marriage that didn't include my effort. Let her measure the absence she once labeled as routine. Because I wasn't angry. I was done auditioning for a role I already played better than anyone else could. And the best part? She hadn't even noticed. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't change the locks. I didn't even move to the couch. That's not how this works. Not for men like me. You don't have to leave loudly to disappear. You just stop showing up. I started with time. Late nights at work became intentional. I took the long route home. Stopped for coffee after dark. Sat in my car and listened to nothing. That silence? It fed me more than any dinner conversation had in months. When I did walk through the door, I didn't announce it. Didn't ask how her day was. Didn't comment on the dishes, the dog, the laundry, the weather. I moved through the house like I had somewhere more important to be, because mentally, I did. She noticed. Eventually. They always do. One night she asked, with that casual tone people use when they pretend not to care. You've been distant. I looked at her. Calm. Not distant. Just balanced. She blinked. Like the words didn't land the way she expected. Because she was used to me explaining myself. Used to emotional debt paid in full, even when the bill wasn't mine. I didn't owe her clarity. Not anymore. I stopped sharing my schedule. If I had plans, I left without announcing them. Gym, bookstore, late meetings. Didn't matter. The absence was the message. I moved our shared photos off my work computer. Changed my phone lock. Not because I was hiding anything. I just stopped offering visibility she didn't value. She asked once, "Why'd you lock your phone?" I shrugged. Everyone does. No heat. No smirk. Just a factual tone that left no grip points. She tried, in small ways, to pull me back in. Suggested takeout, opened a bottle of wine, put on an old playlist we used to love. But I'd already eaten. I wasn't thirsty. The music didn't land. Because I wasn't reacting anymore. I was observing. I wasn't angry, just done carrying the emotional weight for two. She'd spent years treating consistency like boredom. Now she was living inside the vacuum of her own design. She once told me she wanted to feel alive again. As if I was the reason she'd gone numb. No? She was getting exactly what she asked for. Freedom. Space. But here's the part no one tells you. Silence doesn't just create distance. It reflects. And in that reflection, she was finally seeing what it looked like. To be with a man who no longer felt the need to prove his worth. You can always tell when they feel it. The silence. At first, they mistake it for mood. For distraction. Maybe you're tired. Maybe you're stressed. They think it's temporary, that soon enough, you'll recalibrate back into your role. But when you don't, that's when the testing begins. It started with food. She ordered my favorite pizza, the one with the spicy crust and extra garlic I always got on birthdays. She didn't ask if I wanted it, just casually placed the box on the table and said, "Thought you might be hungry." I was, but I'd already eaten. On purpose. I thanked her, sat down with a glass of water, didn't touch the box. She sat across from me, pretending to scroll, pretending not to wait. I finished my drink and stood up. Long day. I'm heading to bed. She nodded, a second too slowly. Still scrolling. Still waiting. The next morning, I found her in the kitchen before I left for work. She had on a shirt I hadn't seen in years, the one she used to wear when we first started dating. Too short to be casual. Too specific to be an accident. She turned, smiled, said something soft about coffee. I took mine to go. That weekend, she put on a movie. One of our movies. Something dumb we'd watched together 100 times, the kind you only love because of who you watched it with. She queued it up. Hit play. Didn't ask if I wanted to join. I didn't. I grabbed a book, sat in the other room, and let the canned laughter bleed through the wall. It wasn't punishment. It was clarity. She wasn't trying to connect. She was trying to reset the power balance. Because for years, I had been the pursuer, the planner, the fixer. I'd absorbed her indifference and translated it into motivation. I'd seen her withdrawal and responded with effort. Now, she was facing something unfamiliar. A man who didn't chase. A man who didn't correct her mistakes by overcompensating with kindness. She asked once, midweek, half serious, half probing, "Are you okay with us?" I looked at her. "I'm just observing." That answer unsettled her more than any argument ever could. Because it meant I wasn't trying to solve anything. And if a man isn't trying to solve it, it usually means he's already solved himself out of the equation. I saw her confusion, her pauses, her attempts at small talk, at proximity. But the truth was simple. She had tested my relevance. Now I was letting her sit with the results. Not with malice. With precision. She wanted to remember what fun used to feel like. Let her remember what losing presents feels like too. It was a Thursday. Midweek. Nothing special. I met Marcus for dinner, old friend, straight talker, the kind of man who doesn't waste words. We've known each other since college. Different lives now, different cities, but still honest with each other in a way no one else dares to be. We talked about work, the usual things. And then, somewhere between the second drink and the check, he asked what no one else had the nerve to. "Are you staying because you want to, or because it's easier than leaving?" I didn't answer right away. I just stirred the ice in my glass. He waited. Eventually, I told him the truth. I'm staying because I want her to see it, to feel it. What happens when a man finally stops begging to be seen? He nodded. Didn't judge it. He understood. There's a moment in every relationship where the scales shift, where one person pulls just a little harder, and then keeps pulling, and the other stops noticing the weight he's carrying because he's always carried it. Marcus leaned in and asked me something simple. What would walking away look like? And I answered just as plainly. Clean. Quiet. No rage. No final scene. Just gone. That was the plan, if it came to that. But it wasn't about punishment. It wasn't about proving a point. It was about making peace with the fact that I had already left emotionally. I just hadn't physically followed through yet. She still didn't know. Not really. She thought this was a mood. A phase. A moment. She hadn't realized that some men don't leave all at once. Some men vanish piece by piece, until one day there's nothing left to reach for. At home, things were steady, and that's what made it worse. No fights. No shouting. Just a chilling calm between us. She smiled more now. Tried harder. Not in obvious ways, but I could feel it. The small touches. The forced laughter. The calculated kindness. It wasn't affection. It was recovery. A strategy. She didn't miss me. She missed who I was when I still needed her. But that version of me had been dismantled, brick by brick. Not out of spite. Out of necessity. You don't rebuild a house on a cracked foundation. You clear the land. That night, after dinner, I sat in my car outside our house for 20 minutes. Lights on in the window. Her silhouette moving across the living room. And I said it to myself, quiet, steady, final. She's not the villain. I'm not the victim. But the man who used to love her? He's not home anymore. It didn't take long before she started trying to pull it back. Not with words. With theater. She wore makeup on a Sunday. Unprompted. Lipstick I hadn't seen since our anniversary trip to Charleston 2 years ago. Her hair done. A dress with intent. She didn't say anything about it. Just floated through the living room like it was normal. Like I was supposed to notice. I didn't. That night, she opened a bottle of wine. 2 glasses on the table. Music low. Candle lit. Everything carefully staged, like she was trying to recreate a moment that no longer existed. I thanked her. Sat down. Took a sip. Then reached for my phone and answered an email without looking up. She asked if I wanted to watch something together. I told her I had work to finish. I watched her shoulders sink by a fraction. Not enough for her to admit defeat. Just enough to show the mask was slipping. She kept trying. The next day, she sent a message mid-morning. Thinking of you. 2 hours later, another one. Hope your day's going okay. I answered both. Short. Polite. Measured. You too. All good. No warmth. No anger. Just neutral disengagement. And that scared her more than silence. Because it meant I wasn't upset. I wasn't trying to fix anything. I wasn't invested in her reaction. I wasn't chasing anymore. And once a man stops chasing, once he gets comfortable in the quiet, the game is over. That weekend, she suggested we go out. Said we hadn't done anything in a while. Picked a restaurant I used to love. Made the reservation herself. We sat across from each other at the table. She smiled. Talked more than usual. Laughed a little too loud. Touched my hand twice. I let her. I didn't respond. On the drive home, she asked if I was okay. I looked out the window and said what I had been thinking for days. You don't want me. You want control. And I stopped volunteering for that a while ago. She didn't answer. Just stared ahead. And I saw it. The panic behind her eyes. Not heartbreak. Not guilt. Just fear. Fear of the version of me she had created. Finally walking away from the performance. This wasn't about love. It was about the narrative. The one where she always gets to decide when the music stops. But this time, there was no music. No applause. No curtain call. Just a man sitting beside her in silence, not as punishment, but as proof. She didn't lose me to someone else. She lost me to herself. It happened on a Tuesday. No candles. No music. No wine. Just a late dinner, leftover pasta, and the tension that had been growing like mold behind a perfect-looking wall. She dropped her fork, pushed her plate away, and stared across the table. Are we going to talk about it, or not? I didn't look up. Took another bite. About what? She snapped. Not loud, not wild, but sharp. Controlled. Like someone who'd practiced the speech in the mirror but hadn't planned for indifference in return. About whatever this is. You've been cold for weeks. You barely speak to me. You come and go like we're roommates. I let the silence hang. Let her sit in it. And then I said the one thing that finally cracked the surface. You remember that party? When you said you missed your ex? Because he was more fun. She froze. I could see her mentally flipping through excuses. A joke. A misunderstanding. A drunken line that didn't mean anything. But I didn't give her the space to rewrite it. I heard you. I heard every word. I just didn't say anything because I was busy processing what it means to be partnered with someone who needs to humiliate me to feel interesting. She started to speak. Stopped. I watched her carefully. Not to punish. Not to win. Just to witness what happened when consequences finally arrived without warning. She whispered. It was just a stupid thing to say. I didn't think. I cut her off. Calm. Level. You did think. You just didn't think I'd think. You believed I'd absorb it like I always do. That I'd move past it because that's what I'm trained to do, to hold the weight without ever letting you feel its cost. She looked down. Hands clenched. No rebuttal this time. And I realized something. She wasn't sorry. She was surprised. Surprised that the quiet man at the edge of her life had finally reached capacity. Surprised that the man who once asked what she needed was now asking himself the same question. What I need? Respect. Depth. A woman who doesn't use nostalgia as a weapon. That night, I didn't sleep in the guest room. I didn't slam the door. I didn't say, I need space. I just laid there, eyes open, still, not waiting for her to fix it, not planning a way back, just existing, fully, clearly, finally, on my side of the line. The next few days passed in a strange kind of quiet. Not the cold kind. Not the angry kind. This was the silence of two people sitting on opposite ends of a burned-out bridge. Neither one willing to step forward. Neither one ready to say it's over. But both knowing it already was. I started waking up earlier. Not because I had to. Just to think. To sit at the kitchen table with a black coffee and let the stillness stretch long enough to hear my own thoughts. Thoughts that had been drowned out for years by noise disguised as intimacy. And I asked myself the question I hadn't dared until now. Do I want to stay? Not out of fear. Not out of history. Not out of the comfort of a shared lease and familiar routines. But truly, do I want to be here? In this version of us? The answer didn't come in a flash. It arrived in fragments. In memory. In math. In observation. I thought about who I was before her. Who I became with her. And who I had to become to survive her distance. I had built a life with someone who applauded my reliability until it bored her. Who craved stability until it trapped her. Who needed safety until she felt suffocated by the very thing she once asked for. It wasn't all bad. That's the part people forget. We had laughter. Real moments. A beginning that mattered. But somewhere along the line, she stopped seeing me as a man and started seeing me as a mirror. And when she didn't like her reflection, she blamed the glass. So, I sat with it. Not as a victim. Not as a martyr. As a man taking inventory. If I left, I'd start fresh. New place. New rhythm. No shared closets. No echoes of old arguments in the walls. There'd be loneliness. But at least it would be honest. If I stayed, it wouldn't be to fix anything. It would be to rebuild something entirely different if she was willing. But this time, not for her comfort. For my respect. I didn't want her to beg. I didn't need her to cry. What I needed was clarity. A clean answer to a simple question. Can she see me now without the parts of me that carried everything for her? That night, I didn't bring it up. Didn't say we need to talk. I just sat beside her on the couch. Not close. Not distant. Present. Because the decision was made. And whatever came next would be on my terms. Sunday morning. Gray sky. Coffee half warm. She stood in the hallway, arms folded, like she was waiting for a verdict. I didn't make her wait long. We're not going back to what we were, I said. That version's gone. Killed the moment you said you missed someone else while standing next to me. She didn't argue. Not this time. She just asked, barely above a whisper. So what happens now? And that was the first real question she'd asked in months. Not a test. Not a trap. Just a plain question. So I gave her the plain answer. We either start over. From zero. No past. No tally. No comparison to who I used to be or who you wish I were. Or we don't start at all. She didn't blink. Didn't nod. Just stood there. I kept going. I'm not here to fix you. Or convince you. Or entertain you. If I stay, it's not because I can't leave. It's because I chose to. And that choice comes with conditions. Not demands. Standards. I could see the weight of that land somewhere in her. Not guilt. Not apology. Just understanding. She asked. And what about love? I almost smiled. Love without respect is just dependence. I don't want to be needed. I want to be valued. If you don't know the difference, then this conversation's over. She didn't speak after that. Just turned and sat down on the edge of the bed. Quiet. Still. And I walked out of the room. Not as a gesture. Not to create drama. But because that was the end of the page. If she followed, not physically, but emotionally, there might be a blank one we could write on. But it wouldn't be the same story. And I'd never again hold the pen with someone else's hand on mine. I stepped outside. Cold air. Empty street. I didn't feel victorious. Didn't feel broken. Just clear. Sometimes strength isn't in leaving. It's in standing still, fully awake, and refusing to be dragged back into the sleepwalk. She asked if I wanted to start over. Truth is, I didn't. But I could. If she earned it. Not with promises. Not with performances. With presence. With truth. With consistency. I had finally returned to myself. And from here on out, anyone who wanted access had to knock. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.